you coverage yesterday to start decluttering for the
recording. So we're going to finish the quiz. So the first quiz number or question is the Great Commission in all Gospels? And then number 2, does all Gospels talk about Mary and the birth of Jesus? That was kind of from the last quiz. So if you were here last quiz, you have a 1-up. Sandy Karen did speak. I don't think I missed anybody. Did I miss anybody? I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, 3. Do all the Gospels have passages of Jesus being tempted? Then 4, which gospel or gospels or gospel has Jesus calling all the disciples to follow him? Or you can say,
are we supposed to holler the answer? Or are we supposed to be writing this down?
Yeah, just write it down.
Oh, okay. I'm over here hollering. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Oh yeah, I was a little confused.
So 5, which gospel is addressed to the Jews? And then 6, which gospel is addressed to the Gentiles? Like specifically. 7, which gospel or gospels has the story of Nicodemus? Number 8, do all the gospels... Wait, hold on. I wrote this... Okay, yeah. Do all the gospels have the story of Jesus being flogged? Number 9, did all gospels mention that Mary Magdalene going to the empty tomb? Number 10, what is the oldest gospel? And then 11, the last one, did all gospels have the betrayal, trial, and death of Jesus? Okay, again, there's only one that I'm really kind of questioning my answer, but I feel like the other ones I feel like are pretty, again, this was my handmade during the sermon and I double checked it last night, but I forgot to Google and check them all. So number 1 is the Great Commission in all Gospels. True. That's from my sermon. So if it's wrong, let me know so I can make fun of Caleb. So, because it is. And if you want to know the scriptures, it's Matthew 28, 16 through 20, Luke 24, 44 through 49, Mark 16, 14 through 16, and then John 20, 19 through 23. So there's all the things. Number 2, does all the gospels talk about Mary and the birth of Jesus? False. Matthew and Luke only. We learned that last quiz. 3, do all the gospels have passages of Jesus being tempted? No, they don't. Only Matthew, Mark, and Luke do. 4, which gospel has Jesus calling all the disciples to follow them? Or that is not all of them. Only Luke and Matthew do. Which gospel is addressed to the Jews? Matthew. Which gospel is addressed to the Gentiles? Mark. Which gospel has the story of Nicodemus? John. Do all the gospels have Jesus being flogged? No, false. Only all of them do, but Luke. Luke does not. Which is weird to me because Luke was a doctor and that's so medical. So I don't know. That was just kind of shocking to me. Number 9, and I may be wrong again. Number 9, did all the gospels mention Mary Magdalene going to the empty tomb? Only Mark and John do. So that is false. And what is the oldest gospel? Mark is the oldest book, which I was surprised on. Did all the gospels have betrayal, trial, and death of Jesus? Yes, they did. All of them do. So, so that was how many of y'all did well?
I did better this week than the week of the movies because the questions last week did not match the movies that we watched.
I know, isn't that crazy? That I know. I tell you, Amanda, ever since then, I'm kind of like everything I know, I have to check because that just shocked me at the last quiz that we did. It was like mind blowing. And so now going through scripture this year, that's what I want to find. I want to see what are the things that I have been told my whole life as a Christian that really are man-made. And we see that though, don't we? We see that with Jesus, as whenever he would go and like be with people and everything. A lot of people would see that as a bad, we're seeing that like with the Pharisees and Sadducees, and why is he hanging out with the tax collectors? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? And so it's just interesting, all of these things. Okay, let me see if I can pull this up.
I only got 5 right.
Well, I don't know how many I would have gotten right, honestly, if I didn't do it. I mean, I really don't. So, okay. So I'm going to go over this. I will not be able to read or anything, so just bear with me. I have 2 things I'm going to read. One is Guide to the 4 Gospels. And this is just a page that I found, and I feel like it had a lot of this stuff. And then I would like to discuss like if there's some things that y'all know about the 4 Gospels, because I think it's just really cool. All the difference between the 4 Gospels. And honestly, I tried to watch God Is Not Dead 2 last night, because that's what really kind of started me thinking about the different perspectives. That was the only God's Not Dead that was not on PureFlix, and I had to pay for it. I'm just too cheap to pay the $4 to rewatch it, because I've only watched it like 5 bajillion times, because I love that movie. But there is one instance in it, and it's the trial scene, and one of the guys, in real life, he was a forensics cop, and so he wasn't a believer though. So he actually became a believer by taking the 4 Gospels and the attest of Jesus, and pretty much kind of like what the Case for Christ did. And he just but he did it through a forensics way, and it's so cool to just see how he did that. And he talks about that in God's Not Dead whenever he's on the trial. So I was trying to find that, but I couldn't. So I found this instead, and this is really good. And I'll just kind of read what it says. So the first 4 books of the New Testament are known as the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And fun fact, if you ever want to help, like with middle school, if you want to find a game to play 4 corners with them. And that's what I used to always do. And it would always be the Gospels. So if you're ever looking for something to keep the youth busy, and it's usually middle schools, high schoolers aren't really into it, but you just do Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they run to the corners. And then that way they're learning the Gospels as they're going. That's a really fun game. Okay, so each book tells us the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so all 4 Gospels focus on the story of Jesus. The Gospels are where we find the famous Bible stories about Jesus, because each Gospel is about the same main character. They all share several elements. For example, each of the 4 Gospels follows this general progression. Jesus, and then this is my son, which is baptism, and then ministry, miracles, wisdom, justice, then death, and then resurrection. A statement of Jesus's divine status, we see that, and then Jesus's miracles and teachings, Jesus's betrayal, trial, and death, and Jesus's resurrection and encouragement to his followers. Why do we need the 4 Gospels? Many people have asked, do we really need 4 Gospels in the Bible? That seems redundant. Shouldn't one do the trick? Maybe that would be the case if Jesus were a regular person who did regular things, but he isn't, and he didn't. John says that the world itself couldn't hold all the books that could be written about Jesus's ministry, which is just so amazing to me. He's probably if the world couldn't hold his whole story, then surely a 16-chapter pamphlet like Mark couldn't. I think I skipped some stuff on that. We have 4 Gospels because during the early church period, 4 people found it necessary to tell the story of Jesus from 4 different perspectives. Each Gospel was written for a different group of people by a different author who was trying to accomplish a different purpose. Let's take a closer look. So the Gospel of Matthew. So as we read Matthew this month, traditionally penned by the apostle of the same name, Matthew is the first Gospel of the 4. This Gospel was written for people familiar with the Old Testament, both the law of Moses and the prophets. Matthew makes more of a reference to the Old Testament than any other Gospel. That's a good fun fact. I should have wrote that. Matthew takes great care to show how Jesus fulfills the prophecies made about him earlier in the Bible, especially focusing on Jesus's role as the Messiah, the promised king descended from David. Today, Matthew is the perfect book to bridge the gap between the Old Testament and the New. In the famous Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Matthew is a great book to talk to if you have people who are Jewish and not believers. It's a great one to use and to go over that with them. So I always like to know which gospel is good to go through if you are mentoring people or no unbelievers, just going through the gospel with them is great. So knowing the difference with the 4 gospels is great because then you can use that. So Gospel of Mark, this is the shortest gospel. In fact, it's possible that the gospel was written so that it could be easily memorized and told out loud, written to go viral, if you will. According to early church tradition, this gospel was written by John Mark, the same guy who backed out of his ministry journey with Paul and Barnabas. Mark purportedly aided the apostle Peter later in life, and this gospel is an arranged collection of Peter's memories of Jesus. Mark was written for a wide audience. This gospel focuses on Jesus's role as a suffering servant and son of God. While other gospels contain long discourses and sermons of Jesus, Mark is all about action. This is where we see Jesus doing things and doing more things. It's very action oriented. The word immediately shows up frequently in the 4 gospels. Mark reads most like a story. Mark is great for people like me who have ADHD, who just don't have a lot of focus and everything. Going through Mark with people like that, it's great to go through that because it's very to the point, very much. You're not going to get it's not going to be in details. Like for me, details, I overlook details. I'm not a detail oriented person. Mark is very detailed when he needs to be detailed, but he's very quick in the details. He's not going to draw it out, which is great as well. See, the Gospel of Luke. This is the longest of the 4 gospels, in fact, and the longest book of the New Testament for that matter. I didn't know that. So the book of Luke is the longest book of the New Testament. Luke is a historical journalistic. Oh, wait, I'm going to go back for a minute. He has a little drawing. So Matthew's gospel, Jesus equals King of the Jews, emphasis on the teaching of Jesus. Jesus fulfills the words of the law and prophets, basis of Jewish faith. Mark is Jesus's suffering servant, shows Jesus' authority. The whole book is a declaration of Jesus's work, probably a source for Matthew and Luke. And then the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is the Savior for all. Educational, seeks to arrange details of Jesus's life and ministry in order, and then written by a non-Jewish person for a non-Jew. So Luke is the historical journalistic gospel, a thorough account of the episodes in Jesus's life arranged in chronological order. This gospel was written to establish believers and the teaching of Jesus. Church tradition recognizes the first century physician Luke as the author and editor of this book, which is how it gets his name. Luke may be one of the only non-Hebrew authors of the Bible based on a few clues we pick up in New Testament. This gospel presents Jesus as the seeking Savior of all nations. It was and continues to be a rich story of Jesus's life and ministry for both those who don't know much about Jesus and those who have a great deal of familiarity of the Old Testament. Luke was a doctor, so he's very detailed. So if you ever have a quiz or a test or anything, when it comes to medical or anything medical, like parables of medical and everything, just guess Luke, because Luke is very detailed whenever it comes to health. And so he's going to go more into detail about the sicknesses of people. He's going to go more into detail about that because that's his job. He was a doctor. So he's very much, because of him being a doctor, he's very detail oriented. And so you'll see lots of details with Luke because he's detail oriented. That's his personality, you can tell. And it's because he was a doctor. So the Gospel of John, Jesus equals God, written to inspire belief, written long after the other Gospels, most unique content and focuses on signs and statements. John is the persuasive gospel. It's written to show the miracles of Jesus so that those who read his story will believe in him and have everlasting life. John's account of Jesus's teaching and miracles emphasize the divine nature of Jesus Christ. To John, Jesus is the cosmic Son of God, come to destroy the works of the devil. The whole book is arranged to present Jesus this way. This means that the Gospel of John has very different feel from the other 3. The way the gospel starts is a good example. Mark begins with Jesus's baptism. Luke begins with the happenings surrounding Jesus's birth. Matthew begins with Abraham and traces the generations down to Jesus. But John takes us all the way back to the very first words of the Bible, in the beginning. John is telling the story of the divine being who became flesh, dwelt among us, and died so that we might have everlasting life. And then, so just really quickly, how do we read the Gospels? The Gospels, like other books of the Bible, were intended to be read in one sitting. That doesn't mean every time you read from John, you need to read the whole thing. But it does mean that if you want to know them better, you should set aside an hour or so to read the Gospel in one go. If you have time to do that, that would be great. But I like doing the chapter. This is just his opinion. This gives you a feel for a generational flow of the Gospel's narrative. You'll notice everything recurring motifs. You'll see how the tone shifts in different movements. As you read the Gospels, ask the question, what does Jesus say about himself? Who is Jesus talking to? This is vital. Is he talking to the disciples, his enemies, a massive crowd? What does Jesus say about God? How does Jesus react to different situations? What pleases him? What upsets him? What does Jesus tell people to do? Why are there so many different gospel accounts? And then he just talks about other things on that, like about going to another post. And then the last thing I'll do is my Bible had this really cool thing too, and the differences in the Gospels. And I will go over that, and then we'll talk about any of the anything that y'all have questions on. So there was just a part of this I wanted to read because I didn't want to reiterate a lot of the things that he said. This said, okay, so Matthew is organized around alternating blocks, which I thought this is just really interesting. It says stories of Jesus and teachings of Jesus here. So my Bible has this really cool thing, and it has like stories and teachings. So every chapter you do, it has, I don't know if you can see that, it has like a story and then the teaching and then the story and teaching. So there is a way that they did things, and it's so cool that people can think of that and see that like years later. Luke, on the other hand, places the teaching of Jesus in two large sections. Different approaches such as this explain why the gospel authors often place sayings of Jesus in different contexts, as for instance, when Matthew records the Lord's Prayer early in Jesus's ministry, while Luke places it later. The gospel's writers arrange much of their material on topical and logical grounds rather than chronological. And then a lot of times that's the problem, is people see the gospels and they're like, well, this happened and this, and then this, so therefore it's not true. But again, if we see that there's a reason why they're writing it, and it's kind of like a car accident. If you see a car accident, there's somebody who got hit, who was an eyewitness, and who heard about it. And so, you know, and you have those different point of views, and that's kind of like the gospels. We're seeing that too. We have, you know, someone who was there, someone who heard about it, someone who, sorry. And then one from a different perspective, like John is coming from a way completely different perspective. He's coming from more of a personal, like making Jesus more of a person. Like we're seeing his deity as a human, versus, Mark, who is, or was it Luke? I can't remember who, or Matthew, no, it was Matthew, is showing the Godhead in him, because it's the Old Testament. And so you're seeing why they're writing with the way they are. And so the earliest reference to any gospel was made by Papias, a church father who is the first decade in the second century, stated that Mark wrote accurately, but not in chronological order, the traditions he learned from Peter. Thus, early readers noticed that the difference between the Gospels, understood some of the basic causes of the difference, and did not regard them as problematic. And so, like just for instance, it says the baptism of Jesus. In Matthew 3:17, the voice from heaven states, "This is my beloved son." And Mark 1:11 and Luke 3:22, the voice states, "You are my beloved son." Explanation: in Mark and Luke, God's voice addresses Jesus. Matthew shifts the audience to the bystanders in order to make clear to his readers that God would have them know that Jesus is his son. The overall meaning is unchanged. So if you do see a difference, it's good to just kind of see, again, to connect them. And to so why are they different, and to kind of look into that and everything. So I think that's fun, and hopefully we'll do that throughout this year as well. If I catch those whenever we dig into a chapter, if in that case, I will definitely go over that and everything. So Janie, I use the CSB Study Bible. I love this translation. It's absolutely my favorite. And it's just the study Bible, and it's really pretty. So, okay. Does anybody have anything on that? There's a lot on that, but I really do think going through the 4 Gospels and just knowing why and who their audience is, it makes it understand it more. Anybody have anything?
Well, like you said, it's interesting how some parts are in all, some parts are in a few, some parts are only in one. Whereas you would think that they would kind of, I guess it would be completely redundant if they were all the same. So, but I just find it, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and just the different styles of the way they write it is really cool.
I was just going to throw in there, I think it's really fun that we are starting with Matthew and we have all these, this is to fulfill the prophecy from Isaiah. And they're like, we just read that. It's so awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so beneficial of doing it this year versus 3 years ago. Because 3 years ago, when we did the New Testament, we didn't do the Old Testament yet. And so I think it's just really cool going from doing the Old Testament and then taking that year of wisdom, but also like Lori, like you said, we did Isaiah last. So doing Isaiah last is going to so connect Matthew and Isaiah. You're going to see so much prophecy. And I think I don't know if I read it in that, but I read it in one of the things that I read, that Matthew has the most references to Isaiah than any other book. Sarah, yes, I can put the link in whenever I put this on. I'll put the link in. It's a really cool website.
You talking about each gospel kind of putting different things in it. I think that also kind of speaks to God using our personal talents, you know, how the personality of the writers, even though it's God's inspired words and he inspired what they should write, but it's from these different perspectives for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it goes back to different personalities. I think John is great if you have somebody who's a feeler and they want, like, they're not a believer, bring them to John, because John is more feeling based, but Luke is more detailed. So like here we have a lot of engineers. Luke would be a great one to go to for detail oriented, because they need details to know. And so I think that that's just what's cool to me about the Gospels as well. Anybody have anything else?
I'm gonna be fired. I realized we didn't pray in. Oh, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Well, this is the year I'm giving myself grace, so there you go.
It is true. Anything else? Okay. Well, we can pray us out then. So
And if Sue's not here, that means we cue Katie. Poor Katie.
yeah. Yeah. And so for everyone who's new, this is an abnormal week. I usually don't do these kind of, what we'll do from now on is I will take a chapter that we read that week and I will really dig into it deeper. And so and we'll go over that. And so what I do is we'll just read some of the passages and then we'll put it off in sections. And then we'll talk about each section and then we'll go to the next. And so we really hope y'all join us again. And if there's anything I can be doing different, let me know. I always say, like, I'm okay with criticism. I'm okay with any of that. So please message me or email me at Shannon@passionatepennypincher.com and you can let me know how I can do things different. I mentioned last time, but I think I am seriously, I'm probably going to do a Facebook Live in the main Digging Deep page this weekend. I just have not had time until today is like my first day that I don't have like craziness. And I can actually breathe. But I think what I'm going to do is do one night a month at night and do a Bible study at night. But that will be the same lesson. So if you've come on Thursday day, you don't need to come on Thursday night because it'd be repetitive. I know I talked to everyone and a lot of people couldn't do at night in this group, but I know people have messaged me about it. And so instead of doing something different, I'll just do the same lesson, but it'll be at night. And I'm really thinking Thursday night is the night that I'm going to do it because that just works good for my schedule. So just so I will probably end up talking about that this Saturday whenever I do a Facebook Live. So just in case y'all see comments or something like that, I know y'all are great about answering stuff. Just know that I will talk about that, and I'll make it a definite, like which Thursday of the month I'll do it. By Saturday I'll decide. So I got to figure out Faith's schedule too. So any rate, I just wanted y'all to know that as well. And so Paige, I'm a nurse and would love to have different options for logging on with y'all. That would be awesome. Yeah, and that's the whole goal. I've had people message me that work full time, and I understand that, and it's hard, but you still want community. So we'll just see how it goes. If it's not successful, then I mean that's fine. But I just really know that this group is so vital for everyone. I mean, like it's become such a great group, and so much friendship has joined and everything. And I just love that God has done that. That's all God. And so I just really think it would be really cool if God did that again. But we'll see. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. And next week, I think I'm not going to tell you the chapter I'm going over because I can't remember for sure. But I have it already mapped out. And so again, next Thursday, 9:30, we'll do a chapter, and we hope you join us. So Katie, if you don't mind praying us out, that would be awesome. Unless anybody has any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I don't like silence. So we will, Katie, if you don't mind praying us out, that would be great.
Don't mind at all. God, I thank you so much that we could come together and just have kind of a chatty time and learn some more about your word and how you use different people with their different talents. I pray for Vale that you would just give her peace and guidance and wisdom as she goes through what she's going through right now, that you would just give the peace that passes understanding and the new mercies every day to face what she needs to face. I pray for those of us facing grief and losses and illness and all the things that we face, and just help us to turn to you in our troubles. I pray that you'll bless this week and bless our paths that we take, that you would just turn your face upon us and give us peace and blessings. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Y'all have a great week. Thanks again for joining. And I will put that link whenever I put this on the main Facebook page in the Digging Deep group.